L'objectif de cette réunion était de comprendre les préoccupations des syndicats concernant les déficits des fonds de pension à prestations définies, des entreprises privées, des entreprises publiques et des autorités locales et de prendre connaissance de leurs enjeux relatifs. Lors de la réunion, les représentants de la FPU ont été informés qu'un comité technique sur les fonds de pension des organismes statutaires avait été créé au niveau du ministère des Finances, de la Planification économique et du Développement. À la suite des recommandations du comité technique, le gouvernement a pris un certain nombre de mesures pour améliorer le niveau de financement des fonds de pension des organismes statutaires. Ces mesures comprenaient la fusion des fonds de pension, l'augmentation des taux de contribution et des injections de liquidités. Pour aller de l'avant, la FPU a été invitée à partager les informations dans le cadre du processus initial de collecte d'informations concernant ces préoccupations spécifiques et il a été convenu d'organiser d'autres réunions par la suite. Monsieur le Président, je voudrais également informer la Chambre que pour les entreprises du secteur privé, il incombe aux entreprises de présenter un plan de financement pour combler tout déficit conformément aux dispositions de la loi sur les régimes de retraite privés. Les sociétés d'État qui disposent de fonds de pension privés sont également réglées par les dispositions de la loi sur les régimes de retraite privés et il leur incombe de combler tout déficit de financement. Les organismes statutaires générateurs de recettes sont tenus de prendre les mesures appropriées pour financer tout déficit de leurs fonds de pension sur leurs fonds propres. En ce qui concerne les déficits des fonds de pension des organismes statutaires ne générant pas de recettes, la Chambre se souviendra que dans ma réponse à la PQ numéro B796 du 27 juillet 2021, j'ai indiqué qu'un comité technique avait été créé au niveau de mon ministère pour examiner la question. Ce comité a formulé plusieurs recommandations, en particulier, nous avons augmenté les taux de cotisation pour certains fonds de pension d'organismes statutaires, fusionner les fonds de pension de certaines institutions qui ont été fermées, contribuer à l'amélioration du niveau de financement sur une période de 10 ans à partir de l'exercice 2022-2023 des fonds de pension des organes statutaires dont le niveau de financement est inférieur à 60%, injecter des liquidités dans les fonds de pension qui ne sont pas en mesure d'honorer leurs obligations en matière de pension et fournir un montant de 225 millions de roupies pour l'exercice financier en cours afin de combler les déficits de certains fonds de pension d'organismes statutaires et d'améliorer leur niveau de financement. Merci.
Est-ce que le ministre peut nous dire s'il est satisfait du progrès accompli à ce stade pour régler ces problèmes de déficit au niveau des fonds de pension? À ce stade, est-ce que le ministre est satisfait?
Monsieur le Président, en tant que ministre des Finances, bien sûr que je vais dire que tout déficit n'est pas bon pour l'économie en général. Mais je dois aussi rectifier en précisant que nous sortons de cette période difficile qu'est la crise économique que nous avons vécue en 2020 et 2021 et que s'il y a une amélioration, et amélioration il y a, nous pensons que nous sommes en train d'aller dans la bonne direction avec le taux de croissance qui est en train d'arriver. Et la seule façon de combler ces déficits, c'est d'améliorer la performance de ces entreprises.
Est-ce que le ministre qui est aussi responsable du SAIC, est-ce que le ministre est au courant que, par exemple, au niveau des casinos, que la SAIC n'a pas contribué, parce que 50%, que la SAIC devait contribuer pour ces 2 dernières années au niveau du fonds de pension et qu'il y a un montant de 56 millions puis que la SAIC a pris avec le fonds de pension du casino. Est-ce que le ministre est au courant de cet aspect? Est-ce qu'il compte rencontrer la direction de la SAIC pour régler ce problème?
Monsieur le Président, je ne suis pas au courant de tout ce qui se passe au niveau de ces institutions. Je vais regarder ce qu'il en est et apporter les clarifications par la suite.
Next question.
Thank you very much. B-stroke 613, please.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I am informed that as at date, the total acreage of land under vegetable cultivation is about 6,000 hectares. And this includes open field cultivation as well as cultivation under protected structures. Thank you.
Will the minister state whether the land suitability index is still available?
I will need a specific question for that. I can come back to the House at a later stage.
Next question.
E614. Mr. Speaker, sir, autism spectrum disorder is one of the neurodevelopmental disorders. The diagnostic criteria are defined in two symptomatic dimensions, which are persistent deficits in communication and social interactions observed in various contexts, the restricted and repetitive nature of behaviors, interests, or activities. So this definition is dimensional and is completed by a level of severity according to the level of assistance required. In fact, we do not speak of autism today per se, but of spectrum disorders, given that the disabilities and needs of people with autism vary and may change over time, since the pathology is in social behavior and communication. While some people with autism are able to live independently, others have severe disability that require long life care and support. Autism often impacts education and job opportunities. In addition, the demands on families providing care and support can be significant. Social attitudes and support from local and international authorities are important factors that determine the quality of life of people with autism. People with autism often have comorbidities, including epilepsy, depression, anxiety, attention deficit hyperactive disorder, and challenging behaviors like sleep disturbances and self-harm. The level of intellectual functioning is extremely variable and can range from profound impairment to superior cognitive abilities. Based on WHO publication on autism dated 29th March 2023, around 1 in 160 persons in the world has an autism spectrum disorder. Hence, according to this estimate, approximately 7,000 persons may suffer from autism spectrum disorders in Mauritius. Mr. Speaker, sir, I wish to inform the House that there are 379 patients suffering from autism who are known cases following treatment in our public hospitals. They are as follows: 73 at Brown Secar Mental Health Care Center, 37 at Dr. AGG2 Hospital, 80 at Victoria Hospital, 150 at Jawaharlal Nehru Hospital, 5 at Bruno Chong Hospital, and 72 at SSR National Hospital. However, these patients suffering from autism who are following treatment in private as well. So we have another group of patients following treatment in private. I'm informed by Autisme Maurice that the SEDAM, Service d'évaluation et de diagnostic de l'autisme à Maurice, the evaluation service of Autism Mauritius has diagnosed around 191 patients suffering from autism since 2018 to date. The SEDAM, the previous autism diagnosis service of Autism Mauritius, diagnosed around 180 individuals from 2012 to 2016, and in total, Autism Mauritius has diagnosed 371 patients suffering from autism. So there are many undiagnosed cases of autism, as people are still reluctant to disclose or are unaware or that they have children who are in fact suffering from autism. In the context of the World Autism Awareness Day, Ministry has proceeded with the opening of the first Autism Daycare Center at Extriole Area Healthcare Center under the aegis of SSR National Hospital on 1st April 2022. The multidisciplinary center provides psychological support to children and adults living with autism spectrum disorders, as well as their caregivers. The center has an occupational therapist who helps them to increase their autonomy and equip them with daily life skills. The center also has a speech therapist who helps people with autism spectrum disorders to develop their social and communication skills. The Autism Daycare Center became operational on a full week basis as from 30th May 2022. The services available at the Autism Daycare Center includes general consultation, occupational therapy, speech therapy, psychiatry, and psychology. There are 31 children who follow treatment for autism at that center. Mr. Speaker, so it is clear that in Mauritius, as well as several other countries, autism spectrum disorders are undiagnosed for multiple reasons, such as lack of training of healthcare employees, lack of experience of normal child development for parents, varying, confusing, and misleading symptoms, and erroneous diagnosis. As such, Ministry is coming up with additional measures in the National Action Plan for Mental Health, which is currently under preparation. This action plan includes training of caregivers at all levels, training of supervisors, teachers, and educators, public awareness campaign, mental health screening, which will be including general screenings in school by Health Promotion and Research Unit. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
This question has been sufficiently canvassed. Move to the next question.
B 615.
Mr. Speaker, sir, with a view to achieving the government target of integrating 60% of renewable energy in the electricity mix by 2030 and to phase out coal by the same time frame, my ministry has published the Renewable Energy Roadmap 2030 for the electricity sector in May 2022. The target of 60% set has taken into account, inter alia, the expiry dates of the current ongoing coal bagasse power purchase agreements, the future energy demand, as well as the maturity and efficiency of different renewable energy technologies. It must be outlined that the last expiry date of ongoing coal bagasse power purchase agreement is the 31st July 2027. The Renewable Energy Roadmap details the different initiatives to be taken to attain government's objectives in the renewable energy sector and the pathway to continue realizing emission reductions up to 2030. The contribution of renewable energy technologies such as hydro, solar, wind, hybrid, biomass, offshore, and ocean energy are spelled out year by year up to 2030 with an indication of their respective share of contribution in the renewable energy mix. Mr. Speaker, sir, in my reply to PQB 1106 on 9th May 2023, I had explained the circumstances for Terra-Gen Limited to resume operations on coal under the existing terms and conditions of its power purchase agreement following its disconnection from the grid in April 2022. It will be recalled that in June 1998, the power purchase agreement between the Central Electricity Board and Terra-Gen, that is ex-CTBV, was signed for the operation of a coal bagasse-fired steam power plant at Mapu for an initial duration of 20 years with expiry on 30th June 2020. The power purchase agreement was extended on 2 occasions and until June 2025 on the same terms and conditions. The Renewable Energy Roadmap published in 2022 had duly taken into consideration the continued operations of the coal-fired and coal bagasse power plants until the end of their power purchase agreements. Mr. Speaker, sir, with regard to production of renewable energy, the House may wish to note that the Central Electricity Board has already commissioned over 100 megawatt of solar PV farms, and currently 175 megawatt of solar PV projects are under implementation. In addition, the Central Electricity Board has committed solar PV farm projects of capacity of around 150 megawatt under various renewable energy schemes such as CNIS and small-scale, medium-scale, and utility-scale facilities, carbon-neutral industrial sector, RE scheme in the medium term. In the medium term, the Central Electricity Board has renewable energy projects for an investment therein will amount to about 31 billion rupees. As regard the target of 60% of renewable energy in the electricity generation mix by 2030, Mr. Speaker, sir, we are confident to meet the target. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Merci, Monsieur le Ministre. Nous parlons ici de 60% d'énergie renouvelable jusqu'à 2030. C'est l'engagement pris par le Premier ministre au COP26. Le 5 mai de cette année-ci, Monsieur le ministre, vous déclarez à la presse, d'ici 2025, 35% d'énergie renouvelable sera dans notre production énergétique. Vous déclarez ceci le 5 mai 2023. Les chiffres du CUB, avec l'entrée en opération des terragen brûlant le charbon, l'énergie renouvelable est à 17,35% dans notre énergie mixte. 17,35%. Et vous parlez de 2025, 35%. Est-ce que le ministre peut expliquer à la Chambre et à la population où il ira trouver les 20,35% manquants pour arriver à les 35% en 2025, à 1 an et demi de 2025, où nous allons avoir des projets, quel projet est en cours, pour suppléant les 20,35% pour les 35%.
Mr. Speaker, sir, in fact, the figures that has been put forward by the honourable member, that is 17.35, is in fact 17.4. That is the percentage of renewable energy in the energy mix. The reasons, Mr. Speaker, sir, are mainly attributed first to the decrease in the production of energy from bagasse. In fact, from 2021, we have produced 250.86 gigawatt hour of energy from bagasse as compared to 187.71 gigawatt hour of energy in 2022, to the fact that there has been a considerable drop in bagasse production, that is from 601,755 ton in 2021 to 728,581 ton in 2022. And the second reason, Mr. Speaker, sir, is due to the fact that there has been an increase in demand after 2 years of pandemic. Mr. Speaker, sir, our roadmap clearly indicates how we will progress over the years to attain the 60%. And in fact, when I look at the figures, the projection for 2023 is around that figure, and it will increase year after year to reach 60% by 2030.
Nous parlons ici de mégawatts et non de kilowatts. Le seul projet, il faut bien le dire, la vérité telle qu'elle, le seul projet actuellement en construction, Monsieur le ministre, qui sera inauguré prochainement, le 7 juin 2023, dans quelques jours, et le projet solaire de 8 MW en Yéta, initié par votre prédécesseur, l'honorable Colin Davelou, avec le Green Energy Company Limited. Depuis 3 ans, vous êtes le ministre de l'Énergie. Est-ce que le ministre peut nous dire, depuis 3 ans, clairement, combien de mégawatts d'énergie renouvelable, vous, en tant que ministre, vous avez mis sur la ligne du CUB pour contribuer à ce mirage de 60% d'énergie renouvelable en 2030, comme l'a dit le Premier ministre au COP26.
Monsieur le Président, je n'ai pas la liste des projets en ma possession, mais n'empêche que je rassure la Chambre, Monsieur le Président, qu'effectivement, nous allons atteindre les 60%. Ce qui est intéressant avec les questions des membres de l'opposition, ils omettent à chaque question, ils omettent de prendre en considération qu'on est passé par le Covid. Le pays était fermé pendant presque une année, ou même plus qu'une année. Alors, il faudrait quand même prendre cela en considération, mais même, Monsieur le Président, en prenant cela en considération, dans ma réponse principale, j'ai informé la Chambre que nous avons presque 30 milliards de projets en chantier actuellement.
Next question.
Yes, B616.
Mr. Speaker, sir, with your permission, I shall reply to PQ B616. As mentioned in the reply to PQ B396 on 19th of April 2022, in the light of the complex nature of the project, an optioneering exercise had to be carried out by the Ministry with a view to determining the most plausible course of action for the execution of the cashless bus ticketing system. I'm informed that various consultations were held by the Ministry in addition to the extensive desk research with regard to the cashless ticketing system in place in foreign jurisdictions. It has been found that there are several models and mechanisms under which the cashless ticketing system can be implemented, each with their own merits and drawbacks. I wish to reassure the House that the cashless bus ticketing system is indeed high on the agenda of the Ministry, as the government is keen on modernizing the fare collection mechanism while also enhancing the administration of the free travel scheme. However, as there are wide technical, financial, and legal implications associated with the cashless bus ticketing system, there is need to thoroughly assess all the components thereof prior to implementing the project. The more so that it has been found that cashless ticketing solutions, once implemented, remain in operation for some 15 to 20 years. Moreover, the system should be designed in such a way that the cashless bus ticketing system can also interface with the electronic ticketing system of the Metro Express Limited, which is already operational. In fact, I'm informed that arrangements were made a few years ago for the implementation of the project, but no further actions were taken due to the bids for the consulting services exceeding the approved budget, while other exercise had to be discontinued due to the wrong procurement methodology restored at that time. This demonstrates, Mr. Speaker, sir, that we should exercise due care when formulating the project requirements so that we do not undermine the successful implementation and subsequently the operation of the system. Accordingly, for a project of this magnitude and level of intricacy, there is need to secure the most optimal technology solution adapted to contextualize to meet the local specificities in terms of fare structures, integration of fares in case of multimodal travel and nature of our bus routes. Mr. Speaker, sir, I'm informed that these issues are being looked into at the level of the Ministry in order to determine the best implementation model for the cashless tracking ticketing system, following which relevant clearances and approvals will be sought for the execution of the project. Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, answering a PQ by myself in 2021, what is PQB 182, the same one as this one. The Honorable Minister stated that there are a number of options that was being explored, including implementation of cashless bus ticketing system under a public-private partnership framework. So, therefore, can I ask the Honorable Minister if this PPP is still on the cards?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, sir, as my honorable friend will appreciate, that this is a very complex issue. You have individual buses involved, you have several private companies involved, and there is high cost implication, and for the government and for the private operators. So definitely, we are looking into several options. As I said in my reply, we are analyzing all the possible options and try to tailor-made the best requirement for the country.
Mr. Speaker, in fact, this is a complex issue. It has been debated in this House since 2021 when it was first announced. Can I ask the Honorable Minister, quel est l'ordre de grandeur qu'on est en train de parler? Do we have an estimate about how much this project will cost? And also, whether it will be possible to include it in the new identity card system. That is, if consideration could be given, that this be amalgamated in the new ID card system, as is the case in some developed countries.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, sir, I'm trying to see in what I've got in terms of information. My honorable friend will appreciate that I'm not the substantive minister. So, I think it has been, it says in the budget estimate 2022-2023, an amount of 20 million was earmarked for the CTS project under the vote item of NLTA, CTS system project. This ministry made a proposal in the context of budget 2022-2023 for a sum of 20 million to cater for the enlistment of a transaction advisor. So this is consultancy services. This is not the project, and we do take note of his concern and suggestion. We'll certainly look into the matter. Thank you.
Table has been advised that the following PQs have been withdrawn: B583, B588, B589, B590, B592, B593, B594, B595, and B580. Next question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. B617.
Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, according to data available at the ministry, the number of foreign workers who have been in the country for more than 10 years stands at 325. These workers are mostly employed in the manufacturing, textile, and export-oriented companies, followed by religious, medical, and ICT sectors. As regard to Part B of the question, I am informed that the permits of all 325 workers are valid as to date.
Can I have one? Yes. The first question is, may I ask the Honourable Minister whether we can have a breakdown of the 325 as regards to men and women?
Yes, we can, but I don't have it with me. I can table it later, at a later stage.
Then, Mr. Speaker, says, what is the policy of government is to keep workers staying in the country for more than 10 years, or are we phasing out this group in the years to come?
Well, Mr. Speaker, the policy for work permit allows a foreign worker to hold a permit for a maximum period of 4 to 8 years, depending on the sector of employment. However, workers in some specific fields are exceptionally allowed to stay beyond the maximum allowable period in instances where their services are still required by the employers. These include expats working for in specific projects, professionals, carers, religious, and medical and manufacturing sectors as well.
table has been advised that PQ B634, B635, B637, B645, B648, B651, B654, B663, B670, B671, B626 have been withdrawn. Next question.
Mr. Speaker, sir, B618.
Mr. Speaker, sir, the Agricultural Mechanization Unit of the MCIA has the responsibility of providing and maintaining a pool of agricultural machines and equipment for planters' community for derocking and land preparation works prior to plantation of their respective fields. As at date, the MCIA is providing for these two services over an extent of 6,563 arpents. With regard to Part A of the question, I am informed by the MCIA that the AMU has a fleet of 16 wheel tractors, out of which 6 are in operation. Out of the 6 in operation, 2 are dedicated to food crop planters. 12 of the 16 tractors were purchased in 2006 in the context of field operations and regrouping project, but have also been utilized for other projects such as agricultural land management system. The 10 wheel tractors are not in operation as they have passed their economic lifetime and are thus beyond repair. I am tabling a list of these 10 tractors. The AMU has also a fleet of 28 crawler tractors, out of which 5 are not operational as they are beyond repair. I am also tabling the list accordingly. Mr. Speaker, sir, I am informed additionally that 4 tractors are being purchased by the MCIA, and the expected date of delivery would be June and October of this year. With regard to Part B of the question, I am informed that since January 2022, 690 applications were received for wheel tractors and 2,523 applications for crawler tractors. And the numbers approved thereof are 687 and 2,513 respectively. In view of the high demand of the services and the limited number of tractors of the AMU, the services of 3 private contractors were enlisted for a total extent of 200 hectares, out of which 118 hectares have been completed. So therefore, I am tabling the 2 lists accordingly. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, I have received complaints from small planters that they are having difficulties to get their applications approved at the level of the AMU. Will the Minister confirm that the AMU has put on hold applications? Is it the case that they have put on hold applications because of the backlog due to the shortage of tractors?
No, I would not say so, Mr. Speaker, sir. But I would agree that there is a very high demand for the services. This is why the services of 3 private contractors have been enlisted to assist the AMU. And this is also why government has implemented other schemes. For example, the schemes implemented by the Small Farmers Welfare Fund, namely the Agricultural Mechanization Scheme, where a subsidy is provided to the small farmer for a subsidy of 3,000 rupees per arpent in order to hire from the private sector and to pay for the services. And there are other schemes to assist planters in that regard. But I agree that there is a very high demand.
Will the Minister also confirm that recently, in February this year, there are 3 tractors that have been purchased by his ministry, and 2 of which...
Please say again.
Yes. Can the Minister confirm that in February this year, 3 tractors have been purchased by his ministry and put into operation, 2 of which are not in use because of regular breakdowns?
I will have to refer to the list I have tabled because all the tractors are numbered accordingly. Maybe these tractors are on this. I need to check. But I need to, maybe there's a confusion. What has happened in February, but this is not February of this year. It was in February 2021 that there was an expression of interest to hire the services of the private contractors. Maybe the honourable member is referring to that. No? I will need to check that, Mr. Speaker.
I'm trying to help the Minister for the benefit of the small planters.
Yes, please do. Yes.
With regards to the private service providers, is the Minister aware that some of those private service providers are reluctant to develop mechanized land that are, in difficult topographic conditions? Can the Minister look into the matter?
I will definitely look into the matter, and I thank the honourable member for drawing my attention. For what I have at hand now is that after the publication of the expression of interest, 4 private contractors had expressed their interest. All of them were retained. However, 1 of them backed out. So we are left with 3 private contractors who are continuing to provide their services.
The table is PQ B622, B628, B632, B633, B631, B644, B653, B659, B629, B620 have been withdrawn. Also, PQ B621 has been withdrawn. And finally, PQ B638 and B664 have been withdrawn. Time is over.
Motion.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I move that all the business on today's order paper be exempted from the provisions of paragraph 2 of Standing Order 10.
The question is that all the business on today's order paper be exempted from the provisions of paragraph 2 of Standing Order 10. Those in favor say aye, those against say no. The ayes have it.
Statements by Minister is done. Public bills first reading.
Honourable Vice Minister.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I move that the Local Government Amendment Bill number 8 of 2023 be read the first time.
Seconded.
Public bill second reading.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I move that the Local Government Amendment Bill number 8 of 2023 be read the second time. The purpose of introducing the Local Government Amendment Bill number 8 of 2023 is to amend the Local Government Act so as to empower the President, acting in accordance with the advice of the Prime Minister, to further extend the life of the entire municipal city council and the municipal town council or the entire village council for a period of 2 years. Mr. Speaker, sir, this government has always been clear that there is a need for electoral reform in Mauritius, and this concerns reforming the election of local authorities as well. We have inherited a colonial era system of administration which continues to exist today. While the actual system was in line with the requirement of the Mauritian population in the past, unfortunately, with emerging trends, especially in a post-pandemic era, it is imperative to reform the way local elections are carried out in Mauritius and the local administration in general. The local authorities constitute an essential component of our democratic architecture, as it promotes people's direct participation and engagement in public life. For this very reason, it is more than necessary for our local government framework to be occasionally reassessed and reviewed
so that it remains responsive to the evolving needs of our citizens and fits the 21st century. Besides, there is unanimity over the fact that the physical, social, demographic, and economic landscape of Mauritius has changed drastically for the better over the last few decades. Our local government framework also needs to be reformed and aligned to the new realities and exigencies of modern Mauritius. The government has decided that a ministerial committee be set up, supported by a technical committee, to examine and to make recommendations on, firstly, the local government reform in Mauritius, the advisability of creating additional municipal council, the need to redefine the local government boundaries, and the advisability of holding local council election concurrently with or with a wake of general election, amongst others. The municipal city council and the municipal town council election will be postponed for 2 years so as to enable nationwide consultation with the members of the government, parliamentary and extra-parliamentary opposition, local authorities, and members of the public. Mr. Speaker, sir, at present there is a legal requirement for at least 1/3 of women representation for parties contesting the election. If you have taken a first step in women representation, unfortunately, this is not the case for youth representation. Across the world, young people are having their say in different spheres of activities. For example, environmental issues, be it at the climate change level or their own immediate living environment, on democracy and good governance, just to give a few examples. Encouraging the young people to take an active part on these critical societal issues will not only give the government an additional and different input on policy matters, but would also help to nurture these young people for future responsibilities. Therefore, to ensure more female and youth participation in local politics, the Ministerial Committee will have to consider different options to encourage their higher participation. This government has the courage to bridge these inequalities which others have overlooked. Other issues which must be considered are the functioning of the local government level. For example, there is a problem with a lock-in of a village council member in the executive committee of the district council. The executive committee is appointed by the chairperson of the district council, and he can nominate any district councillor as a member. Once a member is appointed in the executive committee, he cannot be removed even when other members of the village council want to remove him, thus creating an unhealthy situation at the village council level. Another issue being faced by many councils is where a councillor is elected in a particular party, and after some time he is working against his own party. This hampers the proper functioning of the council. The law has to be reviewed to prevent such situations from occurring. Mr. Speaker, sir, with the shift in population in the last decade, we have to review the number of electors in the different council areas, and even the boundaries of this council. As you are aware, with the policy of this government, especially with the creation of the National Development Unit, there had been a massive improvement in the facilities given to the villagers over the years, such that now there is a shift in population from urban to rural areas. New smart cities are coming to the rural areas. 8,000 houses will be built, and that's mainly in the rural areas as well. Is it not time for us to reassess the whole concept of the district and municipal council? All these issues would have to be discussed by the ministerial committee. Besides these structural changes, we have to look at the quality of service provided as a different council. As you are aware, we are working on the I Council for the proper project management. Similarly, the I Council would improve the basic service provided by the local authorities regarding, for example, scavenging, lighting, road maintenance, not to forget cleaning of drains, once we have geographically tagged all these structures. For its successful operation and sustainability in the emerging new structures of my ministry and the local authorities, a new framework is required to empower the High Council operational structure within the ministry and other government bodies. The project also aims at integrating with other existing and emerging digital systems of the government, crucial for good governance and transparency, for a seamless real-time exchange such as the e-procurement, CSU portal, e-licensing, EPMIS financial management, LDA, NECA, NDU, CW, and other service agencies. We should also consider additional service provided by the local authorities. For example, nowadays we have only 46 pre-primary schools run by the local authorities. There are not enough kindergarten run by the local authorities. Now that we have so many mothers going out to work, especially with the decrease in fertility, and we are going to have a shortage of people working in the future, we need to encourage a lot as a woman to go to work. And now that we have so many mothers, as I mentioned, going out to work, it is not important for all local authorities to provide creche facilities and pre-primary school service to the community. Mr. Speaker, sir, with the climate change, we have to look at the structure and services provided by the local emergency operational commands, that is a LEOC, to make them more responsive in case of disaster. Similarly, the Mauritius Fire and Rescue Services are setting up new and additional substations to cover the whole country in a spirit of providing an improved response time. Nowadays, we have to face the reality of climate change. We have all witnessed the damage that has happened in the last few years with flash floods. The municipal and district council should be prepared for disasters and to be able to act efficiently during disasters to save lives and properties of the population. The changes which this government wishes to bring are not only meaningful but radical. A fundamental shift of culture throughout local government is essential, so as to increase the response time of council and to ensure consumer satisfaction. This will enable council to fulfill their potential and contribute to the well-being of their communities. The strategy is to build councils which are in touch with the local inhabitants and to ensure that they get high-value service. The current legal provision do not allow for a member of parliament and other nominees to contest both general and local election simultaneously and to hold office as a councillor and a member of parliament at the same time. Request to look into same has been made by members of both sides of the House, and this is yet another important reform which will have to be considered. This will not only help the senior colleague to mentor the young councillors, but would eventually help to improve the overall service of the local authorities. Mr. Speaker, sir, it is widely known fact that elections are resource intensive, and there is a need to ensure that government resources are spent judiciously. To this effect, an important aspect which will have to be considered during discussion would be the possibility to hold both municipal and general elections simultaneously. However, in order to ensure that this is feasible, extensive consultation will have to be carried out with the Office of the Electoral Commissioner. Mr. Speaker, sir, reforming local governance is a colossal task, not only for government, but also for the local authorities themselves. It is difficult and will take time, but the government is committed to it. The government will provide opportunities and incentives to the municipal and district council for change. It will activate the support and motivate transformation through legislation or regulation where necessary, and will work in partnership with the different stakeholders to ensure successful reform. Moreover, no one can deny that new political structures are fundamental for the modernization process of local authorities. Finding the right structure to run the council is paramount if the council wants to be responsive to the local communities and work in the best interests of the local inhabitants. Council will need to think if they need to put in place new structures which will guarantee more transparency, and improve accountability. This would result in the efficient deliveries of high-quality local service. Mr. Speaker, sir, the citizens have the right to know who to complain to, who takes a decision, and who to hold accountable when they have a problem. This right of the local inhabitant will be fully met only if structural reforms are implemented. However, members of the other side would agree that proper discussion will have to be carried out before deciding on any reform. Local democracy will remain deficient if there is no clear and close relationship between the councillors and their communities. All those involved need to develop their skills and need the right facilities and support to be able to operate effectively. The reforms will have to consider the need to develop and to adopt effective tools for councillors to actively engage with the local inhabitant and to ensure that the former are properly trained and equipped for same. The conduct of everyone in local authorities needs to be of the highest standard. This essentially rests on the bond of trust subsisting between the council and the local inhabitants. Therefore, reforms are indispensable if council are to play their part in leading communities and improving people's quality of life. Before concluding, Mr. Speaker, sir, I wish to bring some clarification on the miscellaneous provision Local Government Reform Act 2022 of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. The Act provided for an amendment to the duration of the term of office of the councillors, that is, increasing the term from 3 years to 4 years. I'm advised that this amendment was not held to be unconstitutional by the Privy Council. The main issue before the Privy Council was whether the extended period from 3 years to 4 years applied to the incumbent councillors. The Privy Council held that the extension did not apply to the incumbent councillors as the law was unclear on that issue. I have therefore been advised that the Privy Council judgment does not apply in the present case, as clear and unambiguous provision has been provided in Section 12A of our Local Government Act, so that further extension will apply to the incumbent councillors. Mr. Speaker, sir, I have heard recently that the leader of the opposition saying "Nous sommes pas pour la politique de la chaise vide." That's laudable of him. But I'm sorry, when it suits them, they close the council, disband all councillors, and appoint commissioner to run the council. Mr. Speaker, sir, to conclude, I wish to reassure the House and the population in general that these major initiatives of the government to bring about this amendment will enable proper and in-depth discussion at different levels. And obviously, it's going to take time. That is why this government is coming up with this present amendment. Unfortunately, the post-COVID situation delayed the start of this discussion. Mr. Speaker, sir, I once again reassure the House that the decision of the government to amend the Local Government Act is to bring proper reform to the local authorities so that in future, the Council would be able to provide enhanced quality service to the committee. With this word, Mr. Speaker, sir, I commend the bill to the House.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I must start my speech to protest against the very, very short time that is being given to members of Parliament, on the opposition side mainly, to comment on this extremely important, extremely dangerous bill that is being proposed today. You'll be shocked, or the population will be shocked, Mr. Speaker, to learn that members of Parliament, apart from the leader of the opposition, will have from 8 minutes to 13 minutes each to talk and to expand on their worries regarding this bill. So it is a terrible, terrible thing to happen to us. Secondly, Mr. Speaker, I'm trying to recover from a very bad flu. I want to, so I won't be staying for the rest of the afternoon. With your permission, I'll try to stick to the main points this afternoon. Mr. Speaker, I've listened very carefully to what the Honourable Minister or Vice Prime Minister had to say on this bill. What I will say at the outset, I'll come back to it in a moment, is this is the first time that we have details of what he's proposing. It wasn't public before. But my reaction is that hardly any of the so-called reforms that he wants to bring affect the election process. Hardly any. You're talking about I-Council, you're talking about cleaning and all this. It doesn't affect the electoral process. And so there are a few that will affect the electoral process, like whether MPs or not are able to stand, whether the size of, whether we should have municipal councils in Goodlands, Grand Bay, etc. This, I'm suggesting, Mr. Speaker, we're showing respect to the electorate, can be dealt with for the next mandate, at the end of the next mandate. Make it coterminous at the end of the next mandate with the general elections, but not for this time. It doesn't justify the taking away of the most important right in a democracy, that is the right to vote. Because, Mr. Speaker, there can be lots of types of democracies, but what is sure, certain, is you cannot have a democracy without an election. Not possible. You can have a fake election, you can have a rigged election, you can have a single-party election, but you cannot have a democracy of any type without elections. And when you take away the right to vote, the right for the people to express themselves, then you are in fact denying democracy. You are in fact cancelling democracy. And this time, of course, we're talking about local democracy. And of course, our constitution, and the minister talked about the Trinidad case. I can come back to that. But the constitution of Mauritius does say that Mauritius shall be a sovereign democratic state, a sovereign democratic state. So obviously the first part of my speech will have to relate to this, what is our conception of democracy. And I will say later why I think the municipal elections ought to be in our constitution on the same level as general elections, to, in fact, to deny governments this temptation to play around with democracy. Because democracy is not only having elections when you think you will win, it is having elections full stop, whether you think you will win and whether you will think you will lose. And I will say, in the past too, there have been other instances, but it has to stop. It has to stop. Now, we think that this bill is clearly unconstitutional, and I will tell you at the outset that the opposition will meet in the light of what the Trinidad judgment, and we have some very, very good lawyers in Parliament and outside Parliament who will look at whether or not we should, I'm not committing myself at the moment, whether or not we should bring something up into the Supreme Court for the Supreme Court to decide. But, Mr. Speaker, the last municipal elections were in 2015. It had, in fact, that time been brought forward. It was meant to be, I think, in 2018, and I was in government with the MSM, and we decided to bring forward the election. I was, in fact, in charge of the committee. And again, Mr. Speaker, why was it done? Let's be frank, why was it done? We thought that we could, in fact, gain from the momentum generated by the general election. That was, no one will deny that, that was what happened. And again, I say, Mr. Speaker, I don't think it should happen anymore. Now, the result of that municipal election was 120-0. No opposition, at that time opposition councillor was elected. The then government won all the seats. And the next election, was for a 6-year period, was meant to be for June 2021. As we know, it was postponed once to 2022, postponed again to 2023, and now postponed to a maximum, I hope, of 2025. So we're talking about a municipal mandate which was meant to last 6 years, in fact going to be 10 years. In fact, it's a type of retrospective law. People are end up being in the council much longer than was envisaged by the electorate or by the councillors themselves. Now, Mr. Speaker, let's take this happening today in the light of the extremely important VDEM report, VDEM standing for Varieties of Democracy, extremely pertinent, respected report. Mr. Speaker, as you know, you being a former ambassador yourself, there are 193 countries in the United Nations, 193 countries. Mauritius was found to be the worst autocratic, one of the worst autocratic countries amongst the top 10 of these 193 countries. Imagine little Mauritius being the top 10 of the worst performers in terms of democracy, in terms of anti-democracy. In fact, because people don't really understand what is autocratization. It's not a word that you use when you go home and say, you know, autocratization is happening. What is it? In fact, it's losing your civil liberties, losing your freedom of expression, arbitrary arrest, independent institutions know that they exist, and government having control over all aspects of our lives. In fact, if you listen to Parliament, every week, new agencies, new authorities, new laws are being passed all the time, without ever this having any effect in terms of the efficiency of running the government or the Mauritius c'est un plaisir, making our lives more pleasurable. It doesn't have. All it does, Mr. Speaker, in effect, is increase the power of civil servants and ultimately increase the power of government over all aspects of life of Mauritius. And that is why Mauritius has found itself in the infamous list of the worst 10 autocratic countries according to VDEM in 2021. And Mr. Speaker, we don't want to live in a society like this. We don't want to. Look at the people who are leaving Mauritius every week, every year by the thousands. There's something to be done. And we don't want to continue like this. And so, Mr. Speaker, this postponement of the election inserts itself in this autocratization of the nation, of the government, Mr. Speaker. Now, at least the government could have given a valid reason why. I tried to search what would be a valid reason to postpone the election. Again, this time, there is no valid reason. And the government has not proposed, the Vice Prime Minister has not proposed any valid reason. He has given reasons, but none of it is valid. But it's good. Perhaps everyone would have forgotten that when I was in government, in 2015, we chaired a committee. Most senior members of the House at the time were members of that committee. And the committee was, in fact, what was it for? The committee, sitting since 2015, was to review the Local Government Act and to review the Rodriguez Regional Assembly Act. And we did. We sat and we brought a law, and two laws, as I remember, one on local government to enable the elections a few months later, and one for the Rodriguez to enable again the elections in Rodriguez at that time. Mr. Speaker, when I left in 2016, that committee continued. I understood it was chaired by Sir Anirudh Jagannath himself. How can a committee sitting from 2015 to date, 8 years later, come up with a list of things to do, still not yet done, and we are told that in fact it will not take 8 years, it will take 10 years for this committee, which has, unless I'm wrong, it was disbanded maybe, I am not aware, a committee which I chaired, which brought new number of things, in particular ladies having to, at least one lady having to sit in any council, etc., election, a number of other things. So the point that is to be made is that if the government was at all serious in bringing electoral reform to the local government, it should have been through that committee sitting since 2015 and not for a new committee and chaired by, I was Deputy Prime Minister, then chaired by the Prime Minister himself at the time, and not now to be a simple ministerial committee, as I can see. So, and the other thing, Mr. Speaker, what have we witnessed in that time? We've witnessed constant erosion of the municipalities' powers. We've got government ministers often chairing committees in the municipalities themselves. We have MPs doing the same, giving instructions to councillors. We have the famous private parliamentary secretaries. They are in charge of the NDU, and they also think they should run the municipality. Sometimes they oppose the ministers who are there because there's a power play. Who is going to parrain which project? That happens in my constituency, I think. And also you've got government departments like LDA, Land Drainage Authority, etc., who have taken over powers. Not to mention the NDU. So in fact, the trend of this government has been to take away powers from the municipalities, and not the other way. So it's dreadful. We're dreading any particular reform, so-called reform that will be brought, because in fact, if it was to follow the trend, then in fact it would be totally counterproductive, especially now we understand that you will let government ministers and government MPs and opposition MPs to sit, and so you will have plus d'ingérence encore, this time officially, not de facto, but de jure, by right, they will be there to impose government's will. So, Mr. Speaker, the most urgent reforms that have to be dealt with in local government have nothing to do with electoral reform, or have little, nothing is too dramatic, has little to do with government reform, with electoral reform. It has everything to do with reform of how our local municipalities function, district councils function. And that does not require any postponement of the election. I'll take, Mr. Speaker, what I'll say. Let's say, by some stroke of luck, the Vice Prime Minister withdraws his bill today. He withdraws his bill. He's heard the opposition. We are right, as usual, and he's withdrawing the bill. What would happen? We would have elections. We would have elections. And what would happen with these elections? Were we to win, Mr. Speaker? I'll tell you what would happen. Were we to win these elections? Were we to win? First thing we would do, Mr. Speaker, is to recognize what we are voted to provide services to the town dwellers. We are to provide them with excellent services. That is what people want. They want excellence. They are tired. There's a tired team of municipal councillors in charge of our towns. They are tired. They've been there 8 years. They never asked to be there 8 years. They only wanted to be there 6 years. They are tired. Mr. Speaker, how do we provide excellent services to the town dwellers? First thing is human resource management. There's hardly any human resource management in municipalities. Hardly any. Hardly any. There's no motivation. There's no meritocracy. There's no training. There's no productivity. There's no efficiency. There's no effectiveness. In general. I'm saying in general, I'm not blaming any particular, I'm blaming the system. Not saying 1, 2, because if you do not motivate, if the head of department doesn't know how to motivate, doesn't know how to drive his team, doesn't know how to own his own responsibilities that he has to fulfill, then you will never get. And we have, like this, Mr. Speaker, you can take in my constituency, you can take in any. And I'll take 1 or 2, if you want. 1 or 2 examples of what I mean. I'll just take, Mr. Speaker, the scavenger lorries, the lorries in general that we have at present at the municipality of Quatre-Bornes today. There are 23 lorries. How many lorries are out of order? Give me a guess. 12 lorries out of the 23 are out of order today as I speak. Do you need municipal elections for this? Yes. Do you need reform? No. Electoral reform? No. You just need proper management of the resources that you have, be it labor, be it equipment. The heads of department, Mr. Speaker, it's about time. We tend to blame councillors all the time. But the most to blame, and I will be frank, are the heads of department themselves. They never assume any of their responsibilities. And that is whether because they're discouraged by political interference is another issue. But they never do. And Mr. Speaker, so we need to be able to deliver the right services, effective services, proper services to the inhabitants of the towns, Mr. Speaker. And I said to you just now, we have an old, tired team at the head of the municipalities. What vision does these municipalities have nowadays? What vision? New elections will allow a team to bring new vision. Le plan d'urbanisme doesn't exist for Quatre-Bornes. Where are you going to have leisure? Where's your industrial? Where's your office? Where's your nightlife? What about, Mr. Speaker, an economic plan for each town? If I was mayor tomorrow, I would need to decide how to bring businesses to my town. How do I encourage job creation in my town? Why should people from Quatre-Bornes have to travel to Flac or whatever to get jobs? If I was mayor, I would try and see how can I make the town more conducive as a tourism base. Why not? Attract tourists. Why not? Attract businesses. Why not? So, Mr. Speaker, there is no economic plan. There is no economic promotion of any town. And if you look overseas, if you look at the French towns, Lyon, Marseille, all of them have economic promotion plans. In Mauritius, never heard of in any of our municipal councils. Never heard of. So, Mr. Speaker, and of course, cultural plan, well, which town today has an auditorium worth its salt that will actually provide culture to the inhabitants? We are always renovating Plaza, and I think Théâtre de Pôle has been renovated for the last 50 years, as far as I can remember. But why don't we construct proper auditoriums, modern auditoriums, to give some culture to the people? High quality performances for every culture in Mauritius. And that is, there is no cultural plan. So, Mr. Speaker, there is no vision at all left in the municipal council. It has nothing to do with electoral reform. It has everything to do with putting a new team at the head of municipalities. So, Speaker, I'm going to talk about the environment. Extremely important. Malpropreté partout. Partout. So much so that the Prime Minister's office now has created a new facility, Mori facilities, because malpropreté partout. Everywhere. The West, to be commended, West, because it's relatively clean. It's a pleasure to drive down roads on the western of the country. The North, how are you? North is a bad boy. The North is a bad boy. It's everywhere. Elephant grass, detritus, plastic bottles, this, that. I'm not saying it's just a fault, it's a population also at fault. But the municipal councils, they give contracts to people. They're supposed to clean not just the rubbish, but also all the streets, etc. Nothing's been done because there's no supervision. Anyway, I won't be too long on this issue. Malpropreté partout. And there's no one to drive these efforts, Mr. Speaker. A huge effort needs to be needed. It needs to be done. And we are one of the last countries who were supposed to be nearly high income. Now we are high income, then we are not, and etc. What about the tri des déchets? In the UK, where my mother lives, Mr. Speaker, the scavenger lorry comes every single day. Every single day. One day it will pick up plastic, the next day it will pick up garden waste, the third day it will pick up food waste, and the fourth day heavy goods, etc. That way, there is no temptation for people to go and dump here and there and everywhere. And at the same time, you get tri de déchets. What is it called in English? Selective, whatever it is. Huh? So, yeah, sorting, Mr. Speaker. You get sorting of the waste. And that is highly efficient for recycling. Why in such a rich country, Mauritius, we have taken 150 billion rupees from the Bank of Mauritius, and yet we have 23 lorries, 12 lorries are broken down in Catabon. And when other countries are showing us the way of how to deal with the environment. How to deal with the environment, Mr. Speaker. Waste collection. And Mr. Speaker, when I was in government at the time, I was instrumental to passing a law against eyesores, because I was Minister of Tourism at the time, at the same time, and I was sad to see how our country was going down the drain in terms of eyesores. I meant buildings, principally. That law was passed, enabling the Ministry of Environment, enabling the municipal councils to act against eyesores. People needed to paint their buildings, for instance, clean their buildings, get rid of bare lands, which have become overgrown, etc. But this is hardly ever applied. At least in my constituency, I have never seen it applied since I left. Buildings are left, businesses, they're probably making billions, probably not, millions of rupees in profit. They never think of the inhabitants, they never think of the need to beautify the environment. How can that be in Mauritius 2023? How can that be? How can we allow this sort of laissez-aller? It shocks me, Mr. Speaker. It never stopped shocking me that we are in such, can tolerate such things, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we would also, so the next provided this law is withdrawn, the next municipal council of Catabon and everywhere would give 1,000% attention to the environment, because that is the only thing Mauritius really has, human resources and its environment. And if you don't look at the environment, if you allow it to be like this, then you are, in fact, destroying the future of this country. Mr. Speaker, next thing to look at would be municipal facilities. Often they are closed when people need them most. You try and go to a municipal park in the weekend, it will be closed because, don't know why, maybe they don't have the staff, it's closed. So what's the point of spending tens of millions of rupees on municipal facilities and they are closed? That is not, Mr. Speaker, acceptable. So, municipal facilities. And the Honorable Vice Prime Minister talked about creches and kindergartens. I'm happy he's talking about that, but it's a little bit, it's too little, too late. When we were in government, I was Minister of Social Integration. I'll give you just a few. We opened a creche in Kasi, Maleji Kasi. As soon as we left, that creche was closed. It was a municipal creche. In my own constituency, in Catabon, I, for a long time, was able to assist through CSR, etc., a fantastic creche, which was called Solidarité Maman. Solidarité Maman, for 2 or 3 years now, has run out of money, has run out of management, and has closed. What could be more important for Cité Père Laval, Résidence Père Laval? What could be more important for Résidence Père Laval? That this municipal creche, which was taken over by NGO, should remain open to allow mothers to go to work, to help to feed their families, to allow children to attain the skills that are necessary early on. You know, Mr. Speaker, the saying, after 8, it's already too late. It's not 8 p.m., the age of 8. Because that is the young age is when you must deal and instruct young people. So I'm taking 2 cases. I understand that the crèche in Cité Lacquer also, which we opened, which was a fantastic crèche, was closed. So, Mr. Speaker, it's very well to say that in this new law we will look at that, but why, for all these years, have we forgotten these children? How can we forget these children? And then we are surprised that they don't do well in the extended program, when in fact the crèche in Cité Lacquer was closed, and the crèche in Valégie-Cassis was closed, and probably the one in and but these are just 3 examples of the ones I opened at the time. So, Mr. Speaker, municipal facility is extremely, extremely important, but I'm just talking about what I think is probably the most important one. That is the crèches and the kindergartens, and the new municipal team coming would give extra attention, priority, money, with CSR, with the help of everyone, effort, dynamism in creating crèches for all the poor kids of this nation, because that is what they deserve, and I feel it very sincerely. Mr. Speaker, citizen facilitation, I'm going to talk about something which I think is out of this mind, out of this world. Government spent quite a bit of money for the Minister of Public Infrastructure to have a report on flood areas. I think it was Suez Consulting. I asked a question on this here. Suez Consulting produced a detailed report, every single detail of where the flood areas would be. That would be in red, say, where the drains would be, natural drains, that would be in green. And this, Mr. Speaker, you'd be surprised, it's been paid for by public money, but the government, with the collusion of the municipalities, have tried to keep this as secret as possible. Why? Why? I have a girl, again in my constituency, a lady, just got married. They paid 3 million rupees for a piece of land. I think it was near Beato, if I'm not mistaken. And the notary doesn't know anything. Nobody knows anything. They bought 3 million rupees from a loan. And when they go to ask for planning clearance, no, you can't have planning clearance, madame, monsieur. No, it's in a flood zone. They lost 3 million rupees. And now they are in front of the Environment Tribunal to try and see what can be done. That is an actual case. I will be happy to provide the name of the person if you're interested to help. Because beyond politics, this is a human disaster. It's happened to one person, but it's happening to thousands of persons because you are unable to find out, when you buy a piece of land in Mauritius, whether you'll be unlucky enough for it to be in a flood zone or in a zone of natural drainage. You cannot. They will not tell you. And Mr. Speaker, le droit à l'information, it has no right, government has no right to hide this information. Has no right. The municipalities are hiding this information from the very people that voted for them. And that is why we need elections. We cannot have a municipality like this that continues to hide information. Mr. Speaker, I've taken one case. I'm sure everyone here in this House has other cases like this. What is the solution? Solution? For it to be public. And we would undertake to make those reports public and contestable, aussi, so that you can go and contest and challenge what is on these reports. So, Mr. Speaker, these are all cases not for delaying elections, but for having elections immediately. Not in the interest of the opposition, because we might be quite certain to win, but in the interest of the people themselves. That the people can enjoy a fresh team of councillors to bring about the change that is necessary, Mr. Speaker. I won't go very much longer, just to say that we don't see any events anymore. Remember, I can only take my record, there was this wonderful Port Louis by Light. It was this girl, Dale. We sponsored her, it was wonderful. There were hundreds of thousands of people in the streets of Port Louis. We had a light festival in Kerpip once. I was Minister of Tourism, and in Port Louis, it was through the assistance of Lyon municipality. We had the Minister Belkacem came. We did wonderful things. We did wonderful things, Mr. Speaker. Even a waiters' race in Caterborn. We did wonderful things. Nowadays, zero. Nothing. Nothing. The places are dead. We don't have an auditorium. We don't have street festivals. We don't have events. We don't have anything. That is, Mr. Speaker. And it's quite easy to organize. It's quite easy to organize. And, Mr. Speaker, coming to about the end of my speech, the proposed reforms. As I mentioned, since 2015, there's a committee going. If that committee hasn't thought it necessary, don't tell us now that you need another ministerial committee to do the work that the committee was set up 8 years ago to do. Want to change villages to towns? Why not? But which villages? Because some of these villages, I think you're talking about Grand Bay, Goodlands, even Flack. The population of these villages don't come up at all to the population of the towns. If you take Caterborn, 60,000 voters. If you take Grand Bay, 8,000 voters. So let's not also divide our services so much that we end up with a worse service. There is beauty in amalgamation. There is beauty in some sort of economy of scale. I don't need the Minister of Finance to tell us that. So let's be careful also about what we want to do, very carefully. What would happen if tomorrow in the District Council Rivière-du-Rempart, we decide that Goodlands would no longer be part of District Council Rivière-du-Rempart, neither Grand Bay? What would Rivière-du-Rempart do? Look after what? Poudre-d'Eau and Grand Gomme? We have to be also clear about what service we want to provide and what is best how the best way to provide the service, Mr. Speaker. And that is what I wanted to say. I wanted to just talk about coterminous mandates, which I raised, I think, last time when we were, I don't find my paper, last time when we were talking about this, last time we postponed the elections, because to my mind, there is an undeniable temptation for governments to mess around with municipal and district elections. Because in mid-mandate, usually governments hate having an election. And that is not good, but it is a temptation. And we need to get rid of this temptation. This is what reform is about. You need to get rid of this temptation. And what I'm saying is that not for this election, but for the next mandate, that it be made coterminous with the mandates of the Legislative Assembly. That you would have, like in Sweden, like in South Africa, like in the Philippines, like what India is discussing. India, a nation of 1.3 billion people, are actively discussing about whether or not they should have coterminous mandates, which means that you would have a regional election on the same date as you would have your general election. There would be two boxes. I think we're all fairly educated nowadays. We would vote on one ballot paper for our delightful MPs, and the next ballot paper would be for our desired councillors, and that would be it. That would save hundreds of millions of rupees, and it would save a long campaign, and it would be a real reform that can be brought to our system, and that would need to happen. Don't want it to happen now because we want elections now. We want it to happen in the future, and I'm sure that if this government doesn't do it, the next government will have to think carefully about coterminous mandates and same-day elections for both. We had that, I think, in 2012, when the district elections were held just 1 week before the municipal election. It wasn't done on the same day. But talking up to the Electoral Commission, etc., it is possible. It just requires a bit more planning. It just requires a bit more effort, and no doubt a bit more patience maybe in getting the results out. But it can and it should be done, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, what I tried to show is that very little of the reforms, of the changes that are so basically needed in our municipal councils actually result from the voting system. It is, in fact, from the administration and the team of councillors leading it. That is why I consider there's absolutely no justification for postponing these elections. Absolutely no justification. Whatever law that you want to bring in, we would be happy to consider. And, Mr. Speaker, and this is important, we are also suggesting that the elections for municipal councils and district councils be inserted in the Constitution. In the Constitution. To get rid of this temptation to mess around with democracy and to mess around with the voting, Mr. Speaker. So for all these reasons, Mr. Speaker, I ask the Vice Prime Minister, I ask the government to withdraw this bill, let democracy win, let democracy proceed, and let the people choose freely who they want to bring about all these changes that I have suggested, and in fact I have even promised to the electorate of our times. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Monsieur le Président, nous nous sommes embarqués sur un débat difficile. Si je m'en remets aux interventions qui ont précédé mon intervention, les préoccupations des membres de cette Chambre sont les mêmes. Nous parlons du même thème sous différents angles, la démocratie. Un thème qui a été largement débattu à l'extérieur du Parlement. D'un côté, on parle du droit de vote des 45% de la population urbaine qui participe au suffrage pour les municipales. On accuse le gouvernement de bafouer ce droit. Et pourtant, rien n'est fait différemment de ce à quoi notre Parlement et notre État sont habitués. Le gouvernement veut apporter des réformes aux collectivités locales. La méthode qui consiste au report des élections, d'amender le local government et ensuite organiser les élections pour que les changements prennent effet avec une équipe plébiscitée et commune aux différents régimes. Par exemple, en 2003, les élections des collectivités locales ont été reportées en vue des amendements qui ont été apportés au Local Government Act. C'est la même méthode qui a été utilisée pour l'introduction du Local Government Act en 2011. Tous les régimes politiques ont utilisé la même méthode. Donc pourquoi nous accuser de bafouer le droit des électeurs alors que la raison pour laquelle ces élections sont reportées, c'est pour amener des amendements au Local Government Act. L'autre méthode serait d'amender la loi et d'organiser les élections, mais cela risque de causer de plus graves manquements à la démocratie, comme ce qui a été le cas dans le Local Government Act de 2003. L'exemple concret de ce manquement grave est celle de la section 6 et 7 du Local Government Act de 2003. Ces deux sections faisaient provision pour la création de nouvelles collectivités locales. Elles donnent au président ce pouvoir. Pour la citer, la section 6, the President may by order create any new local authority and extend to that authority the provision of its act. Cette provision a été enlevée dans le Local Government Act de 2011 et la raison avancée était un manque de finances à l'époque. Nous savons tous que cette provision avait été introduite afin de permettre la municipalisation des régions rurales. Cette décision qui a été d'enlever cette provision a été décriée par le leader de l'opposition d'alors comme étant un grave recul à la démocratie, puisque cette provision mettait sur un pied d'égalité les régions rurales et urbaines. Le ministre Eusnou nous propose un comité technique pour pencher sur les réformes, et cette question mérite de retourner à l'agenda des réformes des collectivités locales. Mettre sur pied un comité en amont des élections pour décider des régions qui seront concernées par la municipalisation semble une meilleure façon de mettre sur pied de nouvelles collectivités locales. Des raisons scientifiques telles que l'activité économique et les indicateurs du Human Development Index peuvent être utilisés pour décider de la promotion des collectivités locales de statut de conseil de district à celle de municipalité. Si notre gouvernement décide de réformer les collectivités locales et de permettre cette avancée dans le traitement des villages et des villes, devons-nous amender le Local Government Act et organiser les élections après? Ou devons-nous faire ce qui a été prévu en 2003 à la section 7, c'est-à-dire d'organiser des élections pour ensuite donner au président de la République le pouvoir de créer les collectivités locales et sans passer par des élections, de nommer des conseillers aux nouvelles collectivités créées? Est-ce que cela pourrait être considéré comme une avancée démocratique? Cela me laisse sceptique, Monsieur le Président. Tout ce travail qui est d'étendre la municipalisation des régions rurales doit se faire en amont des élections et non après les élections. Nous ne pouvons pas donner le pouvoir de nomination de tout un conseil municipal au président de la République ou à un ministre des collectivités locales. Si nous parlons sérieusement de démocratie, Monsieur le Président, j'opte pour l'option qui est celle d'amender la loi pour ensuite organiser des élections. Il est mieux de créer ces nouvelles collectivités et ensuite permettre à la population de choisir ses conseillers et non pas d'enlever ce pouvoir à la population pour la mettre dans la main du président de la République ou d'un ministre. La question se posera de quel bord politique seront issus les conseillers nommés par le président ou le ministre. L'opposition estime que les élections doivent être organisées et que les réformes devront suivre par la suite. J'estime que non. La décision du renvoi des élections est animée par une grande ambition, celle de revoir le fonctionnement de nos collectivités locales et d'assurer un meilleur fonctionnement de ces collectivités. Monsieur le Président, en ce qui concerne le jugement du Privy Council, si l'interprétation de l'honorable leader de l'opposition s'avère être celle qui doit être appliquée, cela signifierait que tous les régimes politiques qui ont été au pouvoir ont fauté. Il me semble néanmoins difficile d'imaginer que le State Law Office permettrait que cette loi soit introduite sans commentaire si elle était anticonstitutionnelle. Mais si l'honorable leader de l'opposition pense vraiment que c'est le cas, il doit agir et utiliser toutes les institutions démocratiques à sa disposition. Cela ne peut qu'enrichir notre démocratie et ne la fera reculer aucunement, que ce soit un échec ou un succès. C'est la démarche qui compte. Les manquements que nous aurions aimé, que j'aurais aimé que le ministre Osnu considère pour le comité sont, pour commencer, la représentation féminine. Il l'a mentionné. Pour commencer, la représentation féminine introduite en 2011 était de 1/3 par ward. Et en 2015, 1/3 de la totalité des candidats dans une collectivité. La raison avancée par le ministre Osnu lui-même en 2015 est que dans certains wards, la candidature féminine était difficile. J'ose penser que les choses seront considérées différemment et que le nouveau comité ministériel travaillera sur notre engagement, qui est de présenter 50% de femmes comme candidates. Nous accusons d'un grand retard en ce qui concerne la représentation féminine. Nous nous sommes engagés sur plusieurs instances régionales à améliorer la représentation féminine aux différents niveaux de prise de décision, et notamment en politique. Nous devons envisager la formule des 50-50 au niveau des collectivités locales. L'introduction des 1/3 en 2011 a été révolutionnaire et a permis à de nombreuses femmes de faire leur entrée dans les collectivités locales pour ensuite de devenir députées. Dans ce premier batch, je retiens Karen, Dorine, moi-même et même Rubina et Malini qui ont été membres du Parlement. Nous avons été parmi les premières femmes à bénéficier de ce changement de loi. Cela démontre qu'une meilleure représentation féminine dans les collectivités locales permet à une meilleure représentation des femmes au Parlement. Quand nous considérons tous les barrières sur la route des femmes en politique, cette provision a été un plus et je dirais qu'elle nous a permis de démarrer nos carrières. Donc, je suis convaincue que pour améliorer la représentation féminine au Parlement, qui est relativement faible, il faut adopter la formule des 50-50 au niveau des collectivités locales. Le deuxième point que j'aurais aimé suggérer au ministre Osnu pour le comité technique, c'est la question de la candidature des membres de l'Assemblée nationale. Et le leader de l'opposition semble avoir une très grande vision pour être maire un jour, puisqu'il a fait plusieurs propositions et à plusieurs reprises a dit « si j'étais maire ». Donc l'autre question que le comité doit sérieusement prendre en considération est celle de la candidature des honorables membres de l'Assemblée nationale aux élections des collectivités locales. Cela ne permettra-t-elle pas à une plus grande cohérence entre les collectivités locales et les prises de décision au niveau du gouvernement central? Je pose la question parce qu'il est essentiel de favoriser ce qu'on appelle le bottom-up approach. Nos collectivités sont de petites communes et la participation des députés aux élections des collectivités locales apportera une meilleure connexion entre les députés et les habitants des différentes circonscriptions. Cela obligera aux députés à se sentir plus concernés par les préoccupations quotidiennes de leur mandat. La troisième grande réforme que je voudrais proposer à ce comité est l'introduction de l'âge de vote à 16 ans. Et cela toujours dans un souci de démocratie. Il est important d'inculquer la culture d'État et de la collectivité tôt chez les jeunes, qui sont souvent mis à l'écart des grands débats ou de grandes décisions. L'introduction de l'âge de vote à 16 ans obligera un changement de comportement chez les représentants, mais aussi permettra d'approfondir la culture démocratique chez les jeunes. Le représentant devra répondre aux aspirations des jeunes et les jeunes devront se tenir au courant de la vie de la cité pour y participer. Ces jeunes, les adultes de demain, ont aussi une vision de la vie qu'ils veulent en préparation à leur entrée dans la vie économique. Ils ont leurs propres aspirations du présent et du futur. Monsieur le Président, les réformes dont je vous parle et que je suggère à ce comité doivent se faire avant les élections municipales et ne peuvent venir après. Il serait difficile d'envisager des élections pour ensuite faire provision pour ce genre de grandes réformes de loi. Je soutiens ce projet de loi parce qu'il est essentiel de revoir la démocratie locale et que cela doit se faire avant les élections et non après les élections, Monsieur le Président. Je vous remercie.
Members will suspend the sitting for 45 minutes.